Welcome to the Guyana Border Project. Black, gold. Lessons for Guyana from oil-rich developing nations. Have you been following stories out of Guyana relating to the developing oil industry? Have you also been following stories about structural and other developments in that country? Guyana has become one of the world's top oil-producing countries and in 2025 stands at a pivotal juncture in its history. 2025 is also an election year, so the stakes have become even higher. Hi there and welcome to another episode of the Guyana Border Project. Here is where we take a closer look at the many developments that directly affect the social, economic and political aspects of life in Guyana as well as the country's national security. I am Ryan, your host for today. Come along as we explore this new chapter in Guyana's history. The discovery of vast offshore oil and gas reserves in the Stabroek Block has transformed this small South American nation, once one of the poorest in the hemisphere, into a burgeoning oil producer with the potential for unprecedented economic growth. However, as the preceding discussions on the Essequibo dispute and the concerns surrounding existing oil deals have highlighted, this newfound wealth comes with a few significant challenges. The experiences of other developing nations that have discovered and exploited oil and gas resources offer both cautionary tales and valuable lessons. Many have fallen prey to what is often termed the resource curse, where abundant natural resources, rather than fostering sustainable development, paradoxically lead to economic stagnation, political instability, corruption, and social inequality. Today on the Guyana Border Project, we will delve into the experiences of a few countries that have grappled with oil wealth, explain the common pitfalls and potential disasters that can arise from oil exploitation, and critically examine the methods and strategies that can be employed to avoid these mistakes, offering crucial insights for Guyana's path forward. Nigeria, Africa's largest oil producer, is perhaps the quintessential example of the resource curse. Since the discovery of oil in the Niger Delta in the late 1950s, the country has earned hundreds of billions of dollars in petroleum revenues. However, this wealth has paradoxically fueled widespread poverty, inequality, and instability. Nigeria experienced the so-called Dutch disease, where the booming oil sector led to an appreciation of the national currency, making other sectors like agriculture and manufacturing uncompetitive. This resulted in a decline in non-oil exports and a heavy reliance on oil, leaving the economy vulnerable to volatile global oil prices. When prices fell, the economy suffered dramatically, leading to boom-bust cycles. The sheer volume of oil revenues created immense opportunities for corruption and rent-seeking behavior. State oil companies became opaque, and funds were routinely siphoned off by elites. This systemic corruption undermined public institutions, weakened the rule of law, and eroded public trust. Transparency mechanisms were often weak or ignored, allowing illicit financial flows to flourish. The Niger Delta, the heartland of Nigeria's oil production, has suffered catastrophic environmental damage. Decades of oil spills, the burning of natural gas associated with oil extraction, and inadequate waste disposal have severely polluted land, water, and air. This has devastated traditional livelihoods like fishing and farming, leading to health crises and widespread ecological destruction. The environmental regulations were often poorly enforced, and oil companies faced little accountability for their actions. The uneven distribution of this oil wealth fueled deep social grievances. While a small elite grew incredibly rich, the majority of the population, particularly in the oil-producing regions, remained impoverished and marginalized. This disparity, coupled with environmental destruction, ignited widespread discontent and led to violent conflicts in the Niger Delta that further hampered development. Here's another example of the oil curse. Angola, emerging from decades of civil war in 2002, experienced an oil boom that propelled it to become one of Africa's largest oil producers. The country's vast offshore reserves promised a new era of prosperity and reconstruction. But, similar to Nigeria, Angola's oil wealth became concentrated in the hands of a few elites. State-owned oil company Sonangol, while a major player, was notoriously opaque, and billions of dollars in oil revenues disappeared through corruption and mismanagement. International reports consistently highlighted the lack of transparency in oil deals and the absence of accountability for public funds. This massive corruption meant that the oil wealth did not translate into significant improvements in public services or infrastructure for the majority of the population. Despite its oil riches, Angola remained one of the poorest countries in the world. A small political and business elite amassed enormous fortunes, while the vast majority of Angolans continued to live in extreme poverty, lacking access to basic healthcare, education, and clean water. The oil boom primarily benefited those connected to the ruling party, exacerbating social divisions and fueling resentment. The Angolan economy remained overwhelmingly dependent on oil, with other sectors like agriculture and manufacturing stagnating. This lack of diversification made the country highly vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil prices, leading to economic instability and hindering sustainable development. Venezuela, ironically, provides a stark warning to Guyana, given their shared border and the ongoing Essequibo dispute. Venezuela sits on the world's largest proven oil reserves and was once one of Latin America's wealthiest nations. However, its history is a tragic illustration of the resource curse in its most extreme form. Venezuela's economy became almost entirely dependent on oil exports. The oil boom under Hugo Chavez allowed for massive social spending programs, but it also led to severe Dutch disease. Domestic industries withered, and the country became reliant on imports for almost everything, from food to manufactured goods. The vast oil revenues of Venezuela allowed the government to centralize power, weaken independent institutions, and bypass traditional checks and balances. Corruption became endemic, with oil money being siphoned off through various schemes. This erosion of governance structures made the country extremely vulnerable, and when global oil prices crashed in the mid-2010s, Venezuela's undiversified economy collapsed. Hyperinflation, severe shortages of food, medicine, and basic goods, and mass emigration ensued, leading to one of the worst humanitarian crises in recent history. The oil wealth, rather than building resilience, had created a fragile and unsustainable economic model. In view of the experiences of these countries, here are some common pitfalls and potential disasters from oil exploitation that Guyana must actively strive to avoid. Number 1. Inflation and currency appreciation. A sudden influx of foreign currency from oil exports can lead to a rapid appreciation of the national currency. This makes non-oil exports more expensive and imports cheaper, undermining the competitiveness of other domestic industries like agriculture, manufacturing, and tourism. Governments, flush with oil revenues, often neglect or underinvest in other productive sectors of the economy, leading to an over-reliance on oil and a lack of diversification. This creates an unstable, single commodity economy highly vulnerable to global price shocks. Dependence on volatile global commodity prices leads to unpredictable revenue streams. When oil prices are high, there's a boom of spending. When they crash, the economy experiences a bust, leading to fiscal crises, job losses, and social hardship. Number 2. Governance failure and corruption. The large, easily accessible revenues from oil create immense opportunities for corruption. Elites may engage in rent-seeking behavior, siphoning off funds through inflated contracts, illicit deals, and embezzlement. This weakens public institutions, diverts resources from essential services, and erodes public trust. Number 3. Environmental catastrophes. Offshore drilling and transportation carry inherent risks of oil spills, which can devastate marine ecosystems, coastal communities, and fishing industries. The long-term environmental and economic consequences can be catastrophic, as we have seen in the Niger Delta. The practice of burning off associated natural gas, rather than capturing and utilizing it, releases significant amounts of greenhouse gases, like CO2 and methane, into the atmosphere, contributing to climate change and local air pollution. Oil exploration and production activities, including seismic surveys, drilling, and infrastructure development, can directly damage sensitive ecosystems, including coral reefs, mangrove forests, and marine habitats. For low-lying coastal nations like Guyana, continued reliance on fossil fuel extraction contributes to global climate change, which in turn exacerbates their vulnerability to rising sea levels and extreme weather events. Number 4. Social inequality and discontent. Oil wealth often exacerbates existing inequalities. A small segment of the population, elites, those connected to the oil industry, benefits disproportionately, while the majority sees little improvement in their living standards. The influx of foreign currency and increased economic activity in the oil sector can drive up inflation and the cost of living, making essential goods and services unaffordable for ordinary citizens, especially those not directly benefiting from the oil industry. Number 5. Political instability and conflict. The immense wealth associated with oil can intensify internal power struggles as various factions compete for control over lucrative revenues. This can lead to political instability. As seen with Guyana and Venezuela, oil discoveries in disputed territories can significantly escalate existing border conflicts, raising the risk of military confrontation. Oil revenues can provide authoritarian regimes with the financial means to suppress dissent, buy loyalty, and maintain power without democratic accountability, hindering political development, which is exactly what is currently happening in Venezuela. The strategic importance of oil resources can attract external interference from major powers or corporations, potentially undermining national sovereignty and exacerbating internal divisions. Guyana's nascent oil industry is now of significant interest to the world's political blocs. So, is Guyana safely navigating the oil curse? Are the country's leaders applying the necessary strategies for sustainable and equitable development? To avoid the pitfalls experienced by other oil-rich developing nations, Guyana must adopt a proactive, strategic, and transparent approach to managing its newfound wealth. Based upon the news and information emanating from Guyana, let's see if such measures have been put, or are in the process of being put in place to protect the interests of Guyanese. Number 1. Rule of law and independent judiciary. A robust legal framework and an independent judiciary are essential to enforce contracts, prosecute corruption, and ensure fair play. This builds investor confidence and protects national interests. Independent anti-corruption bodies with sufficient resources and the political will to investigate and prosecute cases of graft, regardless of political affiliation, must be established and empowered. It is essential to strengthen parliamentary oversight, promote free and fair elections, and ensure that government officials are held accountable to the public. This is crucial to preventing the concentration of power and wealth. Number 2. Enhancing transparency and accountability. Full and enthusiastic implementation of ethical standards is paramount. This involves public disclosure of all oil contracts, revenue payments by companies, and revenue receipts by the government. Guyana must ensure full compliance and address any information blackouts. Regular, independent, and publicly accessible audits of oil company expenditures and government revenues are critical to ensure that Guyana is receiving its fair share and that costs are not inflated. Empowering civil society organizations, local communities, and the media to monitor the oil sector, demand accountability, and participate in decision-making processes. This includes providing accessible information and platforms for engagement. Number 3. Prudent fiscal management. Establishing and effectively managing a well-governed sovereign wealth fund, like Norway's government pension fund, is crucial. A significant portion of oil revenues should be saved for future generations, rather than being spent immediately. Strict rules on how much can be withdrawn annually, ideally linked to a sustainable spending rule, like a percentage of the fund's long-term expected return, to avoid boom-bust cycles. Diversified investments should be placed in a broad portfolio of international assets to generate long-term returns and protect against domestic economic distortions. Mechanisms must be put in place to resist borrowing heavily against future oil revenues. This can lead to unsustainable debt burdens when oil prices fall. Saving during boom times and spending more during busts would stabilize the economy and avoid overheating. Number 4. Economic diversification. Oil revenues should be strategically invested to develop and strengthen other sectors of the economy, such as agriculture, manufacturing, tourism, and technology. This creates alternative sources of revenue and employment, reducing reliance on oil. Investing heavily in education, vocational training, and healthcare to build a skilled workforce capable of participating in a diversified economy. This is a long-term investment that yields significant social and economic returns. Building modern and resilient infrastructure like roads, ports, energy and digital connectivity that supports economic diversification and improves the quality of life for all citizens. Number 5. Robust environmental regulations and enforcement. Strict environmental impact assessments, EIAs. Rigorous EIAs should be implemented for all oil and gas projects, with independent review and public consultation. Strict regulations to eliminate gas flaring should be imposed, and these should require companies to capture and utilize associated gas. The Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and other regulatory bodies should be provided with sufficient resources, technical expertise, and independence to effectively monitor, regulate, and enforce environmental standards. A portion of oil revenue should be invested in renewable energy sources like hydro, solar, and wind to diversify the energy mix and contribute to global climate goals. Number 6. Inclusive development and local content. Designing mechanisms to ensure that the benefits of oil wealth are widely and equitably distributed across all segments of society, including through targeted social programs, infrastructure development in underserved areas, and direct cash transfers where appropriate. Implementing effective local content policies that prioritize the employment of Guyanese citizens and the procurement of goods and services from Guyanese businesses within the oil and gas sector. This builds domestic capacity, creates jobs, and ensures that a greater share of the value chain remains within the country. Ensuring that local communities, particularly indigenous peoples, are genuinely consulted and involved in decisions that affect their lands and livelihoods, with mechanisms for fair compensation and benefit sharing. Guyana's journey as an oil-producing nation is just beginning and is fraught with both immense opportunity and significant peril. The experiences of countries like Nigeria, Angola, and Venezuela serve as stark reminders of how the promise of black gold can turn into a curse, leading to economic distortions, rampant corruption, environmental devastation, and social unrest. The war of words over the Essequibo is a separate geopolitical challenge, but underscores the strategic importance of Guyana's oil reserves. This also highlights the need for Guyana to manage its resources wisely and to bolster its national security mechanisms and strategic international relationships. By learning from the mistakes of others and embracing best practices, Guyana has the opportunity to defy the resource curse and forge a path towards truly sustainable, inclusive, and prosperous development for all its people. The stakes are incredibly high, and the choices made today will determine the nation's destiny for generations to come. So, do you think that the government of Guyana is putting some or all of these strategies into place? What are your thoughts on this subject? Is the Guyanese government doing its best to ensure that the oil revenues are being used in the best interests of all the people of Guyana? And how do the threats from Venezuela affect the lives of Guyanese? Let's begin a robust discussion about this. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Guyana Border Project. We hope you found it interesting. As always, your comments are welcome. Please do share this and our other content with others and encourage them to join and become part of our YouTube community. We look forward to your company on the next episode of the Guyana Border Project. Goodbye for now.